Chapter 20. Steele managed to get some more sleep after Reeves left, and awoke the next day around 11 o'clock. He was planning on going and seeing Knox at the hospital, but just after he finished dressing and was about to gather his things to leave, there came a loud knock on his front door. "What now?" he grumbled quietly as he walked from his room. The building had fairly tight security at the front door, on the ground floor and garage, which hindered just anyone walking inside and taking the elevator to the many floors. The only reason Reeves managed to bang on Steele's front door was because he was a police officer. Steele reasoned that it was likely a neighbour who'd come calling to complain about the ruckus last night when Reeves showed up. He was taken by complete surprise when he opened the door to see Benedict Van der Mont standing there, framed by two muscled bodyguards. Steele's voice became caught in his throat, and his gut twisted uncomfortably as he wondered why the board member of the company had come to speak with him. "Mr. Van der Mont doesn't like waiting outside," the bodyguard on Benedict's left said irritably. Without a word, Steele stepped back from the door and motioned for the trio to enter. Benedict walked in without saying anything, followed by the guard who had spoken, leaving the third of the group to wait outside in the hallway. Closing the door, Steele slowly followed Benedict and the guard into the small sitting area of the apartment. "Are you going to offer Mr. Van der Mont a drink?" asked the guard, his tone making it sound more like a demand. There's only tap water," Steele shrugged, finding his composure. "This apartment is quite small," Benedict spoke up, looking around in disdain. "The view is terrible as well. Don't you find it cramped?" "Are you on the market for a new house?" Steele asked, his sarcasm obvious. "Watch your tone," the guard snapped, glaring at Steele. "Easy, Dino," Benedict said to calm the bulky bodyguard before turning his full attention to Steele. "Do you know why I'm here?" "I'm sure I can guess," Steele replied, his tone still the same. "Then you are aware what happened last night," said Benedict, and Steele nodded. "I knew I was right about you." Benedict laughed, his demeanour becoming lighter as he took off his sunglasses and stroked his silvery beard. "The moment I saw you with Jimmy," Benedict continued with a smile, "I knew that you were the type of person who could be really successful in the company. You're the reason, aren't you? The reason why Clara and Jimmy killed each other over some pistols?" "Yes," Steele answered, seeing no reason to hide the truth. "Ha, well done!" Benedict congratulated him and clapped his hands a few times. Steele narrowed his eyes slightly, wondering where this meeting was leading. By all appearances, Benedict was genuinely impressed, but surely he did not come here to simply congratulate Steele. "I honestly thought you were working for Jimmy when we met," Benedict continued, "but then you turned around and gave that weapon deal to Clara so you could lure Jimmy into a trap. Marvellous!" Steele's eyes were still narrowed as he wondered how Benedict could know all this. "I was never working for Jimmy," Steele explained cautiously. "He tried to blackmail me into being one of his lackeys." "So was revenge your motive?" Benedict asked, seeming honestly curious. "Jimmy's brother did stab your boyfriend." "I'm not gay," Steele said flatly. "It doesn't matter," Benedict dismissed the notion. "You can't have predicted that Knox getting stabbed though, right? Please, run me through how you planned it. I'm interested to know." Steele crossed his arms, still feeling rather suspicious of Benedict, but he decided to entertain the man. "No, what happened to Knox was unexpected," Steele confirmed, his eyes still narrowed. "If that had not happened, the deal for the guns would have happened very differently." Don't worry about what-if scenarios," Benedict cut in seriously. "I presume you sold the information on the deal to Clara, but why not just claw it off?" "We'd already paid Rex Sterling half," Steele explained. "How much was the deal for?" Benedict cut in again. 500,000. Rather small," the board member said with a dismissive tone. "So how much did you sell the information to Clara for?" 300. "Then she paid the remaining 50% to Rex?" Benedict nodded in understanding before a sly smile came to his face. "So that means you ended up with $50,000 profit. Well done." Steele nodded slowly, his mind still racing to understand why exactly Benedict had come to visit him this morning. "See, Dino," Benedict called the guard. "I told you this guy was who we needed." "You're right as usual, Mr. Vandemont," Dino nodded in agreement. "So why are you here, Benedict?" Steele asked the middle-aged man seriously. "Clara and Jimmy are dead," Benedict said as if it was obvious, his tone becoming more serious. "Their positions need to be filled, and quickly. Otherwise Sovereign or another gang will take control of the area that's been left open. I already have a placement for Clara, but I want you to take Jimmy's mantle." Steele frowned and looked away. He had guessed that Benedict's visit had something to do with the balance of power in East Point. In the past, Steele would have been quick to accept the offer to be associated with the company, but now he was not so sure. "I think," Steele said seriously, looking back to Benedict, "that I will have to decline." "You can't be serious," Benedict scoffed in disbelief. "This is not a position someone refuses. Think of the wealth and power that comes with being an associate. You saw the Huntsman's Lodge, where we met. Jimmy owned that fine establishment. It can be yours now, along with everything else Jimmy had. Do you know how many of Jimmy's crew are putting their name in to be considered for this position? Seconds after everyone learned of the man's death, there were thousands of calls and texts to me and the other board members. Already there is infighting as the crews try to show their dominance." "Then pick one of them." Steele cut in seriously, a deep frown coming to Benedict's brow. "This is not something you should refuse," Benedict said, his tone very serious. "Then you should not have offered it," Steele replied calmly. "Just think how everyone would react if they learned I was given the position. I've only been in the company for a few weeks. No one would accept me taking Jimmy's role." "Of course they would," Benedict snapped, his anger coming to the surface. "They do as I say, and if I say you're the new associate, they accept it." "Regardless," Steele said, "I do not want the position." Benedict looked like he wanted to start shouting in frustration and anger at being refused, but he held his composure, his face masked with rage as he glared at Steele, before striding towards the exit. "You will regret that decision, boy. I promise you that." Benedict snapped over his shoulder as he opened the door and swept from the unit, Dino close at his heels. The door slammed shut, sending an echo around the small apartment, and Steele released a deep breath. "Why did I refuse?" he wondered quietly to himself, confused at his own actions. Becoming an associate with the company was a big step in achieving all the wealth and power he could need. Benedict had said just as much, and when Steele first decided to return to Eden, that had been one of his main motivations. So why did he refuse? His mind drifted back to that moment when he and Farron were standing silently and gazing through the rain across the ocean. He remembered the peace and serenity he had felt then, though the feeling had quickly become vague and left him struggling to recall how it had been. It was that utter peace and freedom he desired. Could money and status not get him that? Always he had known that if one wanted freedom in Eden, they needed money, enough money to buy a small piece in the countryside in the Golden Hills, where they could shut themselves away from society. One needed enough money to be able to spend at least $50,000 a month, and not put the bank balance in distress. It was the power and status then, Steele reasoned, that he did not want. That had to be it. But with power and status came too many problems. With such influence in society, there was too many other people trying to best you, always eager to pounce on the moment you faltered or slipped. "That's probably it," Steele muttered to himself as he took a deep breath and returned to gathering his things to visit Knox at the hospital. An associate has too many enemies at their back. Confirming his own thoughts with a nod, he grabbed Knox's car keys from the bench and left the apartment, taking the elevator down into the underground garage. It had been a while since he had driven a car, and once outside in the traffic, he recalled acutely why he had opted to ride a taxi in Eden. The roads were bustling, and before he was even out of East Point, he had already passed 3 traffic accidents, one of which had several cars piled up and was swarming with paramedics and police. Central was a little better. The roadworks were taking place along nearly every street. Glancing in his rearview mirror at one point, he noticed that a car had been following him since East Point, but that was expected. It was not until well after lunch that he arrived at the hospital and parked at the visitor's lot. Knowing where to go, Steele headed past the administration desk, into the patient wings to the room where Knox was recovering. His friend was awake as he entered, finishing off his lunch as he watched the news. "Steele!" Knox greeted him with a smile, turned the television off as Steele sat down beside the bed. "Good to see you. How was last night?" "It got pretty crazy," Steele said honestly. "Jessica was a big help, though. It's good that you knew her." "Yeah, I like her too," Knox said with a nod. "She was in the military, cyber warfare. Is Farron all right?" "Yeah, she's fine," Steele answered. "She was arrested, though." "Ah, it sucks," Knox remarked. "I doubt she'll get off without any jail time. Shame. I thought you two made a good couple." "Sure," Steele scoffed, turning a frown to his friend. "But what about you, man? Have any of your lady friends come to dote on you?" "Yeah, a few," Knox nodded. "One tried to convince me to get some home treatment at her house, but I assured her that I was better off here. Thankfully, one of the cute nurses helped me out of that situation." "Getting pulled from all angles by women," Steele shook his head. "It must be nice being so popular with the ladies." Knox laughed and shook his head, wincing slightly as he gently rubbed his healing stomach. "You need to leave here today, though," Steele said seriously, drawing a surprised look from Knox. "Benedict Vandermont visited me this morning before I came over. He offered me a position as associate, just as I thought he might." "You accepted, of course," Knox said, seeming confused. "No," Steele said, looking away, and he shook his head. "I thought that's what you wanted," Knox exclaimed. "Money and power. That's one of the reasons you came back to Eden, yeah? How else could you work up being a board member if you don't become an associate first? That's your goal, isn't it?" "Not really," Steele answered, still looking towards the wall. "There is a reason I came back, but it was not only to obtain as much wealth and power as I could find. It could help short term, but not long term. I suppose, in the end, what I really want is just a quiet place I can call home, free from society's influences and free from anyone I don't like. Just a peaceful place where I can do what I want." There was silence as Knox pondered Steele's answer, and Steele continued to stare at the beige wall, surprised that he'd been so honest. "There he is," said Knox, drawing Steele's attention. "There's the Reinhardt Steele I remember." Steele scoffed and looked away from his friend, but Knox was right to some degree. "Well," said Knox thoughtfully, "that's what you want. How are you going to get it?" "Good question," Steele said thoughtfully. "But in any case, it looks like we'll need the contingency plan." "Really?" Knox groaned. "You sure you're not just overreacting?" "Doubt it," Steele replied solemnly. "I didn't want to go down this path either, but it looks like we have a little choice." "Come on, Reinhardt," Knox said with exasperation. "It's far too dangerous. You know what the odds are." "I know, Templeton," Steele cut in firmly. "But Benedict's reaction will be to eliminate us now. I've already initiated the contingency plan, so there's no backing out now." Moving at the door eased Steele's growing ire and drew his attention as a young woman walked into the room. "Farron?" Knox exclaimed in surprise. "Hey, Knox, Steele," the woman replied with a slight smile. "I hope you're feeling all right, Knox." "Fine," Knox stammered, his surprise obvious, but Steele hid his smile. "But how are you here? Steele said you were arrested last night." "I got a good lawyer," the woman shrugged. "One of Benedict's, in fact." That brought a frown to Steele's face as he pondered the implications. "Well, that's good," Knox remarked, his eyes going between Steele and Farron. "Have a seat, Farron. What brings you here? Something I can help with?" "Not really," Farron replied awkwardly as she walked in front of the bed, almost pacing. "Maybe. Actually, I was hoping to talk to you both. There was no answer at your building." "You do have my number," Steele replied, his eyes watching Farron closely. "Yes, I do," she agreed as she continued to sort out her thoughts. A few seconds slipped by as Farron continued to pace, causing Steele and Knox to glance at each other in anticipation. "Quite simply, Benedict has promoted me to associate," Farron finally said, confirming Steele's suspicions. "I'm to take over Clara's position." "Congratulations," Knox said, though his tone made it sound slightly like a question, for Farron herself did not seem too excited by the promotion. "Did Benedict see you about taking over Jimmy's position, Steele?" Farron stopped pacing and turned to face Steele directly. "He did," Steele answered casually. "I refused him, though." "You..." Her voice trailed away as she considered the answer, and a look of confusion came to her face. "Why?" "I have other ambitions," Steele said vaguely, looking away. "Are you insane?" Farron exclaimed. "Not only did you rebuke Benedict, but you turned down a position of associate? That's ludicrous." "Don't act like it's such a big deal," Steele sighed and frowned at the woman. "You don't say no to Benedict Vandemont," Farron replied empathetically. "I thought you'd be happy," Steele remarked, catching Farron off guard. "You hate the company, and would have refused as well if you weren't trying to infiltrate the board for the police." "What?" Knox exclaimed, as a look of surprise came to Farron's face. "Don't be stupid," Farron said, a frown coming to her face as she looked away and crossed her arms. "Well, I thought you'd be able to refute the claim better than that," Steele remarked, causing Farron to glare at him. "Wait, she's a cop?" Knox exclaimed, looking to Steele. "Well, I suppose that does make sense to a degree." "No, it doesn't," Farron spoke up, shaking her head. "Yes, it does," Steele said seriously. "Did you forget that you told me who had been responsible for your parents' death, Farron?" Farron did not say anything as she looked away, seeming annoyed. "It was the company who killed your mother and father," Steele continued. "So what other reason would you have to join them, if not for the police and to bring them to ruin?" "I didn't know that," Knox remarked curiously. "Is that why you left high school so suddenly, Farron? I'm sorry to hear that." "It was a long time ago," Farron replied quietly, shaking her head, and still refusing to look Steele in the eye. "No more denials?" Steele wondered, and Farron glared at him. "All right, yes, I'm undercover," she said in a hushed tone. "But that doesn't change anything. You refused Benedict. He's not going to ignore an insult to his pride like that. I know. I profiled him for Reeves." "But you know Reeves as well?" Knox asked, and Steele laughed slightly. "Of course she does," Steele answered for Farron, feeling rather smug at his deductions. "He's my controlling officer," Farron continued to glare at Steele, though her expression was starting to soften. "How could you know that, though, Steele?" "Because of our dinner date," he replied simply. When I mentioned Reeves, you didn't ask me who I was talking about." Farron breathed out an exasperated sigh. "I mentioned Reeves again during our reconnaissance of the warehouse, with the same result," Steele explained. "Not to mention, you were the first person to be struck by the paralyzing darts when the cops interrupted the deal, essentially taking you out of harm's way." "You're so annoying, Reinhardt," she grumbled, causing him to laugh. "That also explains how you got out of lockup so easily today," Knox said thoughtfully. "It does," Steele agreed, though a frown came to his face. "I'm surprised Benedict sent you one of his lawyers, though." "So was I," Farron agreed, finally deciding to take a seat at the end of Knox's bed. "I did suspect he thought I was an undercover cop, but now I'm not so sure." "It would probably be a good idea if you still suspected that," Steele said seriously. "All this doesn't explain why you came here, though," Knox remarked. "You said something about not really, but maybe needing our help." "Yes, I did," Farron replied as the thought returned to her. "There will be trouble in East Point now. I suspect Sovereign will make a move on Jimmy's turf. Now that I'm associate, I could really use the help from both of you." Steele did not reply straight away. His mind moved to other issues that suddenly made themselves apparent, and the arrival of a message on his phone brought a frown to his brow. "Leave now." The message was from an unknown number. "I've never been one to refuse a request from a beautiful woman," Knox said seriously, bringing a smile to Farron's face. "Reinhardt thinks the same. Right, Steele?" The question pulled him from his thoughts, and he looked with some surprise to Knox before looking to Farron. "This is going to be a problem," he said, his expression becoming serious. "Knox, we need to leave." "What?" Farron wondered in concern. "Damn it," Knox groaned, understanding what Steele was saying. "You need to stay here, Farron," Steele said seriously as he gathered a backpack from under the bed. "What are you talking about?" She frowned in confusion. "Please, just wait here until we're gone," Steele said, taking Farron by the arms and looking her in the eyes. Fine, she agreed, glancing to Knox as he gingerly got out of his bed. But will you tell me what's going on? I'll contact you later, Steele replied, moving for the door. Hurry up and get changed, Knox. Knox groaned loudly, but moved to the bathroom to change from his hospital robes. Quickly, Steele took out his phone and sent a quick message. Get it ready. As he sent it, he looked back to Farron, catching the glare on her face as she sat, arms crossed at the end of the hospital bed. Feelings of regret swelled within him, and he was almost compelled to tell her what the problem was, but he held back. It was better this way. Hey, Wolf, no smoking in my car. Just as he had finished lighting his cigarette, Wolf came sharp, turned an annoyed look towards the driver. Slowly and deliberately, he lowered his jet lighter and flicked his fag out the open window. Don't look at me like that, the driver Sid scoffed. Don't like it? Drive yourself next time. Why do you even need a wheelman for this job anyway? Because, Wolf replied simply, turning his focus back out the windscreen to the parking lot in front of them. Well, whatever. The driver sighed and returned to reading the newspaper. Minutes slipped by in silence, and Wolf looked across the parking lot, his eyes scanning the pedestrians moving about, going to and from the lot. He spied two men helping another two in wheelchairs to their car, a woman rushing from the hospital lot. But none were his target. As the minutes slipped by, he turned his attention to his phone in his hand again, reading the message from Benedict Vandermont once more. Reinhard Steele will be at Central Hospital. Take him out. He almost laughed when he first got the message earlier, and even reading it again it brought a smirk to his face, almost as much as his other saved message. We're on. The second message was from a withheld number, but he knew who the sender was. Is that one? Asked Sid, motioning out the windscreen and grabbing Wolf's attention. Walking through the long-term parking lot, over there with a friend. Wolf spotted the pair easily and his smile widened. Yeah, that's Reinhard Steele and Templeton Knox. Wolf nodded, still smiling as he tied back his long hair and reached into the back to grab a large suitcase. Wait here. Make it quick, Sid grunted, returning to his newspaper as Wolf climbed out of the car and strode towards Steele and Knox. The pair did not see him coming as they walked to the lots reserved for long-term parking. Cutting through the vehicles, he watched the pair closely as they moved to a car and started to climb in, absently talking in a friendly manner. As he slipped between two cars, Wolf put his suitcase on the bonnet of one vehicle and popped the lid. Inside was an assault rifle, predominantly used by the Special Weapons and Tactics Squad of the Eden Police Force. The gun was already loaded, and he flicked off the safety as he aimed the barrel towards Steele and Knox's car and squeezed the trigger. The high-caliber rounds tore through the metal of the car's body and ripped into the pair inside. The sounds of shots echoed across the parking lot, and the civilians nearby went ducking for cover in fear. With a dozen or so seconds, the entire clip was empty, and Wolf placed the rifle back in his suitcase. There was also a single grenade in the case, and it was that he grabbed next. Pulling the pin, he tossed the incendiary grenade under the back of the vehicle, where it exploded in a ball of hungry flames, consuming the car and the two dead inside. With his job done, Wolf turned away from the burning wreck and collected his suitcase. He calmly walked back to Sid, who was waiting for him and ready to leave. Wolf tossed the case in the back as he climbed in and closed the door. Almost immediately, Sid took off, speeding away from the hospital before the police could arrive. Seatbelt on, Sid said seriously as he took off. Wolf was already pulling on his protective sash, knowing well the rules when hiring Sid as a driver. He took out his phone as well and sent a simple message to Benedict. Reinhard Steele and Templeton Knox are dead.